Hello everybody, Weegee here, and let's talk about episode 7 of Ice Queendom, Dreams Come Rued. The episode opens up with Team RWBY back in the snowy wasteland, except this time they have Jean with them, who starts buried under the snow, and has to be rescued by Team RWBY. Here we get to see what Weiss thinks of Jean, which is that he's a complete incompetent loser. His weapon is way too big for him, and he's barely able to lift it, nor is he able to use it correctly. Jean's lack of combat skills are reflected here in Weiss's dream. While we are on the topic of his sword though, it looks freaking awesome. The gold phoenix looking guard, the sapphire gem on the pommel, and the black, gold, and silver blade. It all comes together to make one wicked looking blade. Honestly, I wish this is what his sword looked like in the show. I wonder if the appearance of the blade points to Weiss possibly knowing the history of the blade and the Arc family, which is why it's so ornate, with Jean being unable to use it correctly due to the fact that Weiss doesn't view him as a worthy successor of that legacy. They all once again make their way towards the train tracks, with Jean doing his best impression of Link in Breath of the Wild. You can't tell me that them having a blonde guy using his shield like a sled isn't a reference to Zelda. When the train comes, the White Fang once again attacks it, just as they have done previously. And here is when we see Yang's plan come into play. Instead of doing nothing as they did last time, they protect the train from the White Fang in a pretty sweet looking fight scene, where we see all of them fend off the White Fang fairly easy, except Jean, because he's completely incompetent in battle. By doing so, they fundamentally change the course of Weiss's dream, forcing her in the next scene to make a decision, to accept the change and let them into her mind willingly, or to keep the gate closed and let them crash into it. She makes the former choice, and the wall to her mind opens up, allowing not just RWBY, Yang, and Jean into her sacred empire, but Blake as well, who is Alphonsus, a group of people not allowed into the Empire. This scene shows that Weiss is willing to change, as if she was not, they would have crashed into the wall. It also shows us that Blake is chipping away at that grudge that Weiss bears against Alphonsus, as here she is willingly letting Alphonsus into the Empire, a place that no Alphonsus is allowed to enter. In this next scene I mentioned, we see Weiss enter her office, where it is reported that the train is on schedule to arrive, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, so let's actually talk about the scene. The scene starts with Weiss entering her office. I'm still not sure exactly what this is, where it is reported that the train is on schedule to arrive at the Empire. This surprises Weiss. Behind them brings up the train on the screen, and Weiss sees that her teammates plus Jean are defending the train. As the train barrels towards the wall, Weiss has to make a decision. Let the train in or let it crash into the wall. Her friends plead with her to let them in, and interesting, it's Blake's final cry that reaches Weiss, making her open the door. I like that. I like that they put an emphasis on Blake here at the very end, as it confirms what I was talking about before, that it's not just RWBY that is changing Weiss for the better, that she isn't the only one precious to Weiss. An interesting thing that I noticed here while they were on the train though, is that the rose on the back of RWBY's jacket is light blue. Yeah, do with that information what you will. When the train stops, our heroes are greeted by hundreds of robots, chanting Big Nicholas. We switch back to Weiss, who notes that Blake fought off the White Fang for her. This I feel is an important note, as I think this might be the moment that this dream Weiss starts to separate Blake from the White Fang and other Faunus. But then her father and brother start questioning her about letting a Faunus in, and we see some of that resistance that Xion was talking about when they talked about changing the dream. While part of Weiss wants to change, the other part of her is holding on to what she was taught by her father. Weiss also mentions being the only one who can carry out Nicholas's will. I'm wondering what that will is. I mean, I don't think it includes the mistreatment of Faunus, as while we don't know a lot about Nicholas, all things point to him being a good person. I do wonder if by this she meant bringing the Schnee name back to what it was before her father took over the company, as in Volume 2 she does mention the restoration of her family name is one of her biggest goals, a goal that has since been disregarded, which is a shame. The scenes with her father in Volume 7 and 8 would have been better if she still cared about that. Though I guess now it doesn't really matter considering the events of Volume 8. Back to our team, and they have sent Jean down to explore, who runs into a robot, and after a tense moment, the robot ignores him. Continuing his journey, he arrives at the Silly Jail, where Dopey Klein recognizes him as a Silly. Jean seeing his teammates inside, uses what Klein said against him, so he will open up, so he can go back inside. After all, he is a dummy, so he belongs inside the jail. As he enters, he sets his shield in the opening of the door, blocking it from closing. Here we get to see why Jean was made the leader of his team. as despite his relative inexperience and inadequate combat skills, he is a rather quick thinker, being able to convince Klein to let him in and then finding a way to keep the door open so that he can make his escape, as well as save his teammates. He may not be book smart, but Jean is a pretty good strategist. Entering the jail, Jean is greeted by a festival of sorts and his teammates, who give him some winter clothing which help him with the effects of the nightmare grim. The inside the jail's appearance means that I was right about Weiss keeping things that she viewed as childish, such as fun, locked away, as it's only things meant for dummies. Oh, it also means that Weiss's love festivals may come from more than just the organization that goes into them, like she said in Volume 1, but she views that reason as childish. Exploring the jail, Jean finds a twisted tree, in the center of which is a golden relic, much like the one that RWBY found. So when I first saw this, I felt really dumb, as the first thing I thought was, why does Jean have a relic representing him? It was in the silly jail, where he was after all. That doesn't really make any sense though. He and Weiss aren't all that close at this point, like I wouldn't consider them anywhere near friends yet. If this was after the dance, I could see maybe him being important, as that was the scene where I believe Weiss's opinion of Jean changed. Then a few moments later, my brain actually started working, and I was like, oh, it's obviously Yang, which I was ecstatic about, as it means I was right a few episodes back when I said that there would be relics that represent each member of Team RWBY, as they represent Weiss's want to change. But that leaves the question of why was it in the silly jail, and not in the room like RWBY's was. My best guess is that they are put in a place where Weiss believes each of the members could get to, or they are in a place that may represent an important memory of them. RWBY's relic was left on the bunk bed, and one of the most important moments between RWBY and Weiss was the scene on the bunk bed where she tells RWBY that she always wanted the bunk bed. This moment marked the start of their friendship. Now let's switch over to where this relic was found. Ignoring the silly part, it was found at a festival with lively music and an overall carefree atmosphere. Lively and carefree, who does that sound like to you? It sounds like how Weiss would view Yang. The next part explains why it was locked up, as when Jean pulls the relic from its place, the words on the tree switch from stop to go, and a bunch of tiny child Weisses rush out, and oh my god, they are so freaking cute. Look at them! Don't you just want to pitch their little tiny tricks? They even have tiny little mutant nesters. What follows has to be the cutest fight ever, as the army of tiny Weisses fight off the robots, infecting them with Weiss's childish desires. RWBY then uses these tiny Weisses plus Team Juniper to fight the robots, while they make their way further into the Empire. But before that, let's talk about what the tiny Weisses represent. They are both, as the show stated, the emotions that Weiss has kept hidden away since she was a child, as well as all the desires that Weiss views as childish. All the feelings that she felt like she had to lock away, as they would be unbecoming of the perfect Schnee. We even get the specifics of these desires. I want to be pampered, I want a compliment, and the very depressing desire of wanting to have a fun experience talking to her family. We also get to see how long Weiss has held the desire to leave her home, as one of the lines she says is, "I want to go outside." I wonder how sheltered Weiss's life was and how much of the outside world she was really able to experience. She experienced enough to grow a love of festivals, as another one of her lines is, "I love festivals." If the inside of the silliest jail is her childhood, that means she must have had a very good memory of going to a festival. Maybe there's a festival in Atlas that she would always visit with her grandpa every year, before her family fell apart. This love of festivals could explain why Yang's relic was found in the jail. Weiss's view of festivals is similar to the way that she views Yang. While I can't quite hear what the song is saying in the background, it has a very RWBY feel, and I can't wait to get the soundtrack for the show, as this song is a bop. We flash over to Angry Klein, who has been infected by Weiss's childish desires. He gets a few steps down the road before getting obliterated by Nightmare Weiss. She's accompanied by Whitley, who tells her there's no way she can say that she is worthy of being a Schnee now, and I think this helps prove my point that Weiss views these childish desires as unbecoming of a Schnee, as now that they have escaped the place Weiss has locked them away in, and people can now see these desires, she is no longer worthy of being called a Schnee. Bat Whitley finally gets what he deserves as Weiss cuts him with her blade, sending him flying away. It felt so good to see this little shit get sent packing, after having to hear him criticize Weiss every chance he got. Back to Team RWBY for a brief moment where they have reached the base of the Tower of Nicholas, where they have placed another marker. Then we go back to Jean, who has destroyed a robot. It seems the effects of the nightmare on him are getting worse though. Pierre approaches him to help, and then we get a wide shot with Nora and Ren in the background doing something. Also, these two tiny Weisses are utterly adorable. Then a giant child Weiss shows up, and the show turns into an attack on Weiss, with several giant child Weisses destroying walls and buildings. It's the most terrifyingly adorable destruction of an empire that I've ever seen. But why did the Weisses get giant? I think that has to do with the inability of Weiss's mind to properly deal with these childhood desires. It's probably another reason why Weiss's mind locked them away. She doesn't know how to deal with these emotions, so when they are set free, they quickly grew out of control, destroying everything. Maybe that's another reason why Yang was the lock for the desires. Due to Yang's relationship with RWBY and her status as an older sister, Weiss views her as someone able to handle childish things. It's not just the Weisses that spurn out of control though. Red and Nora also turn into these zombies and attempt to attack Jean, as well as Pyrrha, who unlike the other two isn't affected for some reason. My theory is that has to do with how Weiss views Pyrrha as more mature than the other three, so obviously her childish desires wouldn't have an effect on her. It could also be some sort of effect that Jean is having on Pyrrha as someone who has been infected by a nightmare before. Maybe he has some sort of ability to affect the occupants of the world. Weiss shows up and wipes out Ren and Nora with ease, protecting Jean and Pyrrha, but honestly it was probably more just protecting Pyrrha. So remember in the last episode when I mentioned they implemented 3D animation, likely as an attempt to save budget for later scenes, to make them look amazing. Well, here's that later scene. As Weiss shoots a beam into the air, causing a storm of lightning and snow, and holy shit does it look awesome. The effects are great. The way the clouds form and the lightning courses through the clouds in the sky, before the snow begins to swirl through the air, it's holy shit, it's just amazing. The music swells up as this happens, then the rings around the Nicholas statue shatter, and start forming arms. Then the statue attacks Team RWBY, and the episode ends with a beautiful close-up shot of Weiss explaining she will render judgment upon them. And damn, that ending sequence was fucking epic. Seeing Team RWBY's plan play out was immensely satisfying, as they learned from their previous expeditions and used all the information they had gathered about Weiss's dream world to their advantage. It's always cool to see characters learn from their mistakes. Jean was used perfectly, I think, without taking away too much from our main protagonist, and then we had the introduction of the cutest Weiss design ever with the tiny Weisses. I loved the way that they used these tiny Weisses to represent Weiss's childhood desires. And when they became these hulking Titan Weiss, signifying her inability to handle these desires, it was really funny seeing them lumber around destroying buildings. This episode also had probably the cutest fight in RWBY history with those tiny Weisses, and the fights all looked really good as well. The music in this episode also took a step up compared to the previous episode. The song that played during the fight as well as in the Silly Jail was an absolute bop. It actually makes me really excited for the release of the soundtrack. Speaking of the Silly Jail, them introducing another relic, this one most likely being a representation of Yang, was great, as it means that Yang will likely get more focus, something that she hasn't really gotten a lot of in this show. But it also means that they're going to have more focus on the entire of Team RWBY's relationship, not just Weiss and RWBY. We'll likely be getting a black relic at some point as well. And then there's the ending sequence with Weiss. Holy shit was this scene epic. The giant beam shooting in the air, causing clouds to coalesce, with lightning flashing through them, before a snowstorm starts to pick up around the entire empire, obscuring Team RWBY's vision. Then we get what is most likely our mid-boss before Weiss, in an armed Nicholas statue. And that final close-up shot of Weiss as she declares she'll run her judgment upon them was amazing. So yeah, overall this episode has been the best so far. I'd honestly give it a 10 out of 10. This episode felt like it ended before it started. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Weegee out.